All right, welcome. Today, we are taking a little trip back in time to an era when showing up for work was basically a 50-50 shot at, well, not coming home. We are talking about the absolute deadliest jobs of the Industrial Revolution.
Look, I get it. Your boss is a pain, the office Wi-Fi is slower than a snail, and maybe Carol from accounting keeps taking your favorite mug. It feels bad, I know, but I promise you, after what you're about to see, your office is going to look like a five-star, all-inclusive luxury resort.
So, yeah, let's just put this into perspective. On one side, we've got a minor inconvenience. On the other, a very real, very horrifying workplace hazard from the 19th century. This pretty much sets the tone for today. So, let's meet the folks who actually lived this.
We're going to start with a job that sounds, I don't know, kind of quaint, right? Making matches. The workers were mostly young women, and people called them the match girls. But trust me, the reality of their work was anything but quaint. See, to get that classic strike anywhere match, the tips had to be dipped in white phosphorus. And this stuff is incredibly toxic. Day after day, the match girls were just breathing in these fumes, which led to a condition with a name that is terrifyingly literal: Jaw.
The way this thing progressed is just pure nightmare fuel. It would start with something you might ignore, a little toothache, but then your gums would swell up, abscesses would form, and then it gets really weird. The phosphorus building up in their bones would cause their jaws to literally glow a creepy greenish-white color in the dark. The final stage? The entire jawbone would rot away, leaving them horrifically disfigured for life. So, what did the bosses do when their workers' faces started glowing and falling apart? Did they help? Nope. They fired them. The excuse was usually that their disfigurement was, bad for morale. You gotta remember, the idea that a company was responsible for its workers' safety, that just didn't exist. There was no workers' comp. You just got thrown out onto the street.
As if that wasn't bad enough, the exploitation got a whole lot darker. If you think things were bad for the young women in the factories, for children, some jobs were basically a death sentence, which brings us to the chimney sweeps.
So in these big industrial cities burning coal all day, chimneys were constantly getting clogged with this thick, flammable, toxic soot. And the only tool that was small enough to fit inside those twisting, narrow brick tunnels was a child. Poor families would often sell their kids, some as young as 4 or 5 years old, into these fake apprenticeships, where they were forced to climb up into total darkness, scraping that gunk off with their bare hands.
I mean, death was just part of the job description. A kid could fall, they could get stuck and suffocate, or they could get burned. And even if the chimney didn't kill them right away, the constant exposure to that toxic soot meant many of them developed cancer later on. They were, in the most literal sense of the word, disposable. This quote just hits you right in the gut, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the brutal, ugly truth of the era. All that progress, all that steam and steel, it was all built on the unimaginable suffering of the smallest, most helpless people in society. And now we're going into the belly of the beast, the textile factory. These places were just a chaotic symphony of noise, speed, and massive, relentless machines. And inside, you'd find what was maybe the most dangerous job of all for a kid, being a mule scavenger. Okay, so the mule was this huge spinning machine that rolled back and forth on a track. As it worked, little bits of cotton would fall underneath. The scavenger's job was to dart out under the machine while it was still moving, grab the scraps, and get the heck out of the way before the whole thing rolled back and crushed them. Think about that. There was zero room for error. If you hesitated for a split second, if you slipped, if you just weren't fast enough one time, you could lose a hand, an arm, or even your life. Kids were maimed and killed with sickening regularity. And this incredible danger wasn't just for the kids. The main rule of the factory floor was simple. The machine never stops. For anyone. There were no safety guards, no emergency kill switches, just open gears, spinning belts, and rotating shafts, all waiting for one wrong move. 4 inches. Doesn't sound like much, does it? That was the size of a totally unguarded rotating steam shaft mentioned in a newspaper from 1864. A tiny little detail at the center of an absolutely horrific story. According to that report, a young woman's dress just barely caught on that little 4-inch shaft. It pulled her in instantly, And for 3 full minutes, the machine just kept going, twisting and crushing her body before anyone could possibly stop it. It was far, far too late.
So, you'll really have to ask yourself, in a world with glowing jaws, suffocating chimneys, and machines that literally eat people, how long do you think you would have survived a single shift?
Now, it's really easy to look back at all of this and just feel disgusted. But here's the thing. All of this unbelievable suffering, it wasn't completely for nothing. This pain, it had a point. It was the spark that lit a revolution of a different kind.
The sheer brutality of these jobs is what finally forced workers to stand up and say, enough. These stories weren't just tragedies, they became evidence. The famous Match Girls strike in 1888 started because of phossy jaw, got the public's attention, and eventually led to a total ban on white phosphorus. These protests and strikes are what forced governments to pass the very first laws to protect workers, laws that eventually grew into the health and safety regulations we all just take for granted today.
Which brings us right back to where we started. That bad day at your modern job, the annoying boss, the terrible coffee, that entire experience is only possible because generations of people endured things we can barely even wrap our heads around.
Their sacrifice is the reason your biggest risk at work is probably a paper cut. It's why you get to go home at the end of the day in one piece. So the next time work feels a little tough, just take a second and thank them.